reaction the February 15th workshop of the Newmarket Town Council. We have one member who is not present this evening, might be joining us via Zoom, and that's Councillor Ward. Everyone else is present. And our next item is introductions. And I don't know, Joe, if you, Councillor Libatina, if you wanted to take that?
Just state briefly, the goal of tonight is to, for Henry, who works for Community Power Coalition, to bring us up to date, or the council up to date, where Community Power stands as an entity, where Newmarket stands in the process of joining Community Power, excuse me, and then kind of walk us through just a very high level, the energy aggregation plan, which is what we're currently working on, which is the next step of the process of joining Community Power. And I just want to reiterate, at this point, nothing commits Newmarket to anything at this point. Okay, this is strictly, we're developing a plan. Any other questions, comments?
I don't have any. So with that, do we want to hear from Henry Herndon?
Sure. Thank you. Good to be here. And yeah, I'll exactly as Councillor Libatina explained, I'll sort of do a little bit of a status update of where is Newmarket in the community power process. I'll talk about the statewide coalition that is formed that Newmarket was a founding member of back in October of 2021. Get my years right. And yeah, I'll just provide a little bit of context of where the state is and where Newmarket fits within that. And I'll just note that it's been great to work with the committee over the last fall, the summer and the fall. A lot of good folks on that committee, a lot of good discussion and spirited engagement, so you've got a strong group. And yeah, I'm, for those of you who don't know me, my name's Henry Herndon, and I am a consultant here on behalf of Community Power Coalition. And I guess this is my clicker.
Yep, silver buttons.
Very good. So yeah, our agenda, so what is community power? And within that, we're actually going to say what is Newmarket Community Power and where are you in the process of developing a plan, holding this work session, and having hearings to adopt that plan. Also, as I move through this, happy to have interruptions, happy to have Q&A discussion as I go. So if you do want to interrupt me, please do that. We can make this conversational. We'll move to a status update of where does the statewide coalition stand, and we're at a very exciting moment right now. So I'll talk about that, and then we'll just review what will be the steps beyond this plan that will be required of the town council and of the staff of Newmarket to review certain policies and agreements and execute those agreements in order to actually implement the program. And then we can have further Q&A and discussion. So this is just a summary of what this policy actually is, and as a result of recent legislation, New Hampshire cities, towns, and counties, the town of Newmarket can become the default electricity provider for their residents and businesses. Essentially, that's a bulk electricity procurement to achieve an economy of scale, lower electric costs for customers. The utility, Eversource, will continue to own the grid, send the bill, do reliability, remain financially whole in all ways. So that remains unchanged. This is really only about the energy supply part of the bill. And then there are a number of benefits that can be derived. So lower costs, but really more expanded choices as well. Do certain customers want to choose to invest in renewable energy? Does the town over time want to contract with developers to build local renewable energy generation in the state? These are options that can be made available through community power. And the relevant RSA is 53E. So I didn't know if the gentleman on the screen was going to jump in. The other point I just want to make is 2 points really. This is a voluntary program. No customer is required to participate in any way and can depart the program at any time without any fee. And the source of funding for the programs is the revenue from the sale of electricity. There are no taxpayer funds under state law allowed to be contributed to the ongoing operation of these programs. The sort of caveat there is costs that are incidental to startup. If a municipal employee were to review contracts or things of that nature, those are allowable, but you cannot use taxpayer funds to pay for the program other than those incidental costs. So this is a little bit of a busy slide. This is going to just do a high-level overview of what is in your fully drafted electric aggregation plan. And process-wise, this plan must go through 2 public hearings before a town council vote of adoption, which does not commit the town to anything, but does authorize you to implement a program if you would choose. So the outline of that draft plan, there's a number of different chapters and subsections, but the introduction and overview describes like what is community power, sort of what I just gave you, how customers would be notified and enrolled if and when you get to the launch after the numerous subsequent steps. There's information on the number of electric accounts and your aggregate energy usage, discusses the coalition, and really just discusses your purpose and approval and implementation processes. Second chapter is an overview of the coalition. Third chapter is your goals, objectives, and requirements, which were debated and revised by the committee, and those include, at a high level, the goal of competitive rates, goal of expanding customer choice, and allowing for cleaner and local power options, and regional collaborations. Chapter 4 is what is required by the RSA. And that's, it gets a little more technical, but that's just basically legal requirements. You have to treat all customers equally and fairly. You have to meet certain environmental standards that are set by state law. It describes how the program would be operated and funded. Again, making clear that taxpayer funds are not associated with the funding of the program, that it is rather self-funded. Addresses things like net metering customers, folks that have solar on their roof, and electric assistance program customers, folks who are income qualified for discounts on electricity bills. And those individuals can participate and are sort of considered in this plan as per the law. It also discusses if and how you were to terminate, if as a council you were to terminate the program. Then there are a number of appendices, and these are just, they're more like in the details of the context. What is sort of the context of New Hampshire energy policy going back to restructuring in 1996? We required utilities to sell off their power plants and created a marketplace for power generation. Discusses the community power law, discusses how utilities buy power and why we have an advantage with community power. There's sort of a regulated, restricted way in which utilities go into the market once or twice a year, every 6 months, fixed schedule, and that adds costs. And competitive suppliers and community power programs can manage a portfolio. They can choose when to go into the market, short-term contracts, medium-term contracts, long-term contracts, and this approach really demonstrates lower costs than the regulated utility approach. There's just sort of a competitive advantage there. And anyway, some other regulatory details in the appendices, and I'm happy to discuss any of these. I understand the council has the draft plan. There is a quote that I've included here, which I think is relevant. So the plan states that the program will only launch if it is able to initially offer residential default rates that are lower than or competitive with those offered by Eversource, and that provide a renewable energy content that is equal to or higher than Eversource. And the town council will initiate the program if it determines it to be in the best interest of Newmarket. This language was debated in the committee, and yeah, just really working to build in a safeguard that you're going to think about customer costs in implementing the program. Just some key points I've mentioned, I'll just reiterate. Eversource continues to own the grid, manage billing and customer service. The plan, if adopted, authorizes you as a town council to contract with service providers. That service provider could be the coalition, the nonprofit power agency you're a member of. It could be an alternative provider. So you're authorized but not required to do anything. And that programs are voluntary.
Just a quick one. So basically it's the same as people now, some people switched their provider last year because of the cost that Eversource was going to have. So would you see the same thing? You would still get the bill from Eversource, just the line item would switch to whoever it is.
That's exactly right. And I think my next slide has a picture of that.
Okay.
But, yeah. And just while we're on it, so the customers that haven't made that choice and are just getting Eversource default power,
Right.
they would be notified and then automatically switched, and they could choose to opt out. Customers who do make that choice and do shop, they would be notified but not affected in any way unless they affirmatively chose to join. Yeah, so perfect setup. This is just breaking down the bill again. Half the bill is the blue supply. That's what we're talking about. Half the bill is green delivery. That's Eversource, and that's always going to be Eversource. Doesn't matter Eversource who's doing the supply. Just as Mr. Fournier said, folks can switch now. This is just adding one more option to that. So what that might look like for the customer. On the second page of the bill, it's broken down supplier at the top, delivery at the bottom. The supply line item would be replaced with Newmarket Community Power at that lower Newmarket rate. And then customers could choose, maybe we want a different product option. You know, if Newmarket chooses, say, Granite Basic, the minimum renewable energy product, and like the lowest cost product, that would be lower than Eversource's energy supply rate. And then individual customers could choose a 33% renewable or 50% or 100%. This menu of options can also change over time, particularly as we get towards developing of in-state generators and projects. Newmarket could alternatively say, hey, Granite Plus is still cheaper than Eversource, and it's more renewable energy. We want to go with that as the default.
I think that was my question. Maybe you answered. I might need you to explain it one more time. So as a town, Newmarket could identify one of these as the default way into which we would be, kind of entering into this agreement. But then individual households could still select from any of these
That's exactly
at any
right.
time.
Yep.
Okay.
And I'll just note, right now, so this is the first time these programs have come online. This is the initial menu.
Got it.
At present, Granite Basic and Granite Plus are the only two default options. You could not, on day one, default everyone into like Clean 50. And so this slide just describes, again, from the customer perspective, as required by law. And again, this is likely not until 2024 for the town of Newmarket, if the market is favorable and you decide to implement a program. 30 days before customers would be enrolled, your service provider would mail notifications to every electric account in the town of Newmarket. They get a letter. It says, welcome to Newmarket Community Power. Here's our electric rate. It's compared to Eversource's rate. It's cheaper. Go to this website if you want to opt out. Go to this website if you want to choose the 100% product. And anyone could decline to participate before the program commences or at any point thereafter. And when their next monthly billing cycle comes around, they'll go to Eversource or to whichever supplier they would choose. I mentioned this, customers that already shop with a competitive supplier or make an energy choice on their own, they're notified but unaffected, and no exit fees. And I talked about the different example product options. So
that's new, right? When I saw the presentation by the guy who was the vice mayor of someplace, Lebanon, maybe.
Yes.
And he said that this was purely a financial arbitrage, and that any environmental thing was a longer-term aspect of it.
I don't think that's exactly accurate. There are,
Okay, I talked to him
more,
personally talked to him. That's what he told me.
maybe what the discussion is in terms of really signing contracts for new renewable energy generators, that's not a 2023 concept. That's potentially 2024, and there are a number of those entities that are interested. But these are, they could be contracted with existing hydros or existing renewable generators, but to some extent, this is the purchase of renewable energy certificates. I don't know if that helps.
Okay.
But yes, there are short-term benefits of lower cost and green energy options, and then there are long-term benefits of you can accrue reserve funds, you can finance development of local projects that are going to drive your costs down and provide local economic benefits. And I'm going to get into a lot of that actually. So this sort of concludes where Newmarket's plan, the summary of Newmarket's plan, and at the end I'm going to come back to like next steps and process. But this next section is really going to zoom out from Newmarket and talk about the statewide group. So I'll do that. And I guess before I get real into it, I'll just sort of note, so right now regionally, the towns of Rye and Exeter are fully authorized and contracted and positioned to enroll customers in April of this year. They could execute their power supply contracts as soon as next week. So those two in the Seacoast are part of a cohort of 10 statewide, Lebanon, Hanover, Enfield, Plainfield in the Upper Valley, Peterborough, Harrisville, Walpole in the Southwest, Nashua, and this group is sort of the wave one. They are looking at enrolling customers in April and executing their power contracts as soon as next week. Beyond that, here in the Seacoast, the city of Portsmouth, the town of Durham, the city of Dover. I should say this: the town of Dover and the city of
No, you got it right.
yeah, the city of Dover and the town of Durham have adopted plans and are, but have not signed the final contracts. The city of Portsmouth will adopt this plan on Tuesday of next week. So there's a lot of leadership in the Seacoast. Newmarket's sort of right along with that group, but unlikely to bring customers online in June of this year, which is what some of them are looking at, April to June. And then beyond that, there are dozens of towns that are going to town meeting, and more towards a 2024 launch. And Newmarket may or may not be more in that category.
I think we're more in that category, to be
Yeah.
perfectly honest.
Yeah, I think, hypothetically, I don't think this is the case, but hypothetically, if this town council wanted to launch as soon as humanly possible, you probably couldn't launch this spring. Just because there's a number of timeline requirements, the state has to review your plan, you have to notify the utilities and the customers, all of that, and really, April, May, June is the best time to launch, and from a market perspective. The energy market prices tend to fall in the spring. We're coming out of the winter, there's high demand for natural gas, it's expensive in the winter, and spring is just a really good time to go on the market, so 2024 spring might be a really good time for Newmarket. Again, these are generalities, but in general, October, November, December isn't a great time to go on the market just because the demand is rising and everyone needs natural gas for heating and electricity. Anyway.
In July, August, September is air conditioning, those kind of things were still.
Yeah, and there's another complexity of you have to line up with the utility to some degree, and they kind of black out a couple months, and some of those are summer months. And I don't. That's beyond where we're at. But okay, so I'll talk about where's the statewide group. So Newmarket is a founding member of the coalition. There are 14 founding members. The group has grown to 28 now. Boscawen's not on this list. The city of Berlin up north just voted to join last week, which would make 29. But really the point of this slide is governed for and by communities. So this is a nonprofit entity controlled by its members. Councilor Weinstein and Mr. Fournier are appointed to the board. And there are representatives from the board from all of the different members. There's a great breadth and depth of experience and expertise in volunteer community-led capacity going into this. Folks with legislative experience, utility executive experience, people who have founded energy companies. So there's a lot of really good people. Yeah, maybe I'll leave it at that, but they're just listed here. This shows the coalition members across the state and its scale as compared to the utilities. So the red bar, current membership, that shows the current members at full enrollment, the volume of electricity that would represent as compared to, if we look at Eversource, the dark gray and the light gray is current Eversource scale or volume of electricity. And then if you just look at the bottom dark gray, that is the hypothetical once communities depart to community power, what would the volume of Eversource look like? So part of the point is if you look at the red bar, current membership, and you compare to Unitil, Liberty, and Electric Co-op, You can see that already the current membership of the coalition is larger than those 3 smaller utilities. And if you look at the blue bar, those are all of the communities that have not joined the coalition but are interested and may join in the coming months. So once you have all the current membership and then this list of interested communities, in 2 years, 3 years, maybe 4 years, this could be sort of the dominant way energy is provided in New Hampshire. This is a little bit of a laundry list, but just sort of recapping a lot of what went on in 2022. So the coalition, its board and its committees have held over 100 public meetings. There's been a lot of leadership on legislative and regulatory initiatives, and really driving the Public Utility Commission development of the rules. The coalition conducted a solicitation process to hire its service providers, and has done that, has executed those contracts, is equipped with $750,000 in startup funding and considerable credit support, and this is all in preparation for the go live in April. Additionally, we're going to talk about sort of your next steps after you finish the plan. There are some key policies: rates, risk, reserves policies, and a data protection policy. These are policies that the town would have to consider and adopt to go live, as well as a cost-sharing agreement and a service contract. So those are all linked in here, and that's more of like a previewing. Over the course of this year, the council will want to familiarize themselves with those materials. Those have all been adopted by the board and the launching communities. And then we're going to get a little bit into the technical analysis and the financial forecast, and I'll try not to go too, well, yeah, we'll get into that. But the vendors, Ascend Analytics in particular, it's a firm that has been hired. I'll talk about them. They run power procurement for major utilities and community power agencies across the country. They have conducted a financial forecast. They have run stochastic modeling simulations of how might the market move over the coming 1 to 5 years for our initial course of business, and how can we project our finances out across those different scenarios. And we'll talk about the findings of that and really the validation that this is very financially advantageous right now, particularly because of the very high-priced market we're coming out of. This spring is in particular an advantageous time. So these are, we talked sort of, I think of this as governance, and I think of this as operations. So these are the technical firms that have been hired that will operate procurement and customer service. So Ascend Analytics, I mentioned them. They're the firm that monitors the energy market day to day, week to week, month to month, and manages the power procurement on behalf of the communities collectively. And that's really, it's a portfolio of power contracts, and they manage a portfolio. The second firm, Calpine Energy Solutions, they're the registered entity with ISO New England, so they have certain requirements. They sit in the ISO New England electricity market, and basically they sort of do what they're told by Ascend in terms of buying power. They also provide retail customer service. All of the utility customer billing and data exchange, they'll bill the customers through the utilities systems, and they will maintain a call center and a customer support center and process if customers want to opt in or opt out or opt up, all of that customer service. The coalition's working with Clean Energy New Hampshire, a couple of law firms, a couple of startup consultants, and there is a bank, River City Bank, that will maintain the account through which revenues flow. I'm not going to go really into detail here, but these are just some slides about sort of the history and credentials of these firms. So Calpine, they've helped launch over 20 of these agencies elsewhere, and they have significant staff expertise and capacity. And folks are more than welcome to review this. We have a lot of sort of material from that competitive process in vetting these firms, but this is just the high level. Ascend, industry leader in software for the energy transition. Again, they manage the portfolio, and happy to sort of discuss questions on the technical services they perform, but I may just leave this at that for now. And now we're going to get into sort of some of that technical analysis. I don't know if there's questions on that before we do. So this slide is showing, for those Wave 1 communities, the findings of the assessment across those members. And I guess the takeaway would be that on the base case, which is sort of what Ascend does is they run 100 scenarios, and then they look at all those from worst to best, and a lot of what we talk about as the base case is the middle, the median, P50 is what they call it, but the median scenario. And in the findings there are $12.5 million in customer savings across those initial communities over the first 36-month term, and an additional $20 to $30 million in accrual of financial reserves. So I'm just going to take a moment on financial reserves. Typically, you might buy power from a competitive supplier. They sell you electricity. Most of that payment goes to the cost of electricity. A little bit goes to their overhead. And then there's their 8, 12, 15% profit margin on top of that, right? What the coalition does is essentially we've created our own supplier. So we have the vast majority of payments flow to the cost of power. There's a cost for overhead. It's 4%. I think it's on the next slide. And then rather than a profit margin for a competitive supplier, the coalition captures that profit and accrues it as a reserve fund and holds it on behalf of the collective membership. Those reserves are important to maintain low rates over time and to get the real benefits of financing projects over time. And then, just see. Yeah, and then just right now we're in a particularly advantaged position where utilities are at the highest rate that they have been in quite some time, and the market is currently falling. So it's, right now there's significant benefit to the launching communities. This is sort of what I was just talking about. This is what we're going to call headroom. So headroom is the difference between the utility's energy rate and our cost of power. And headroom is shared between two, is a trade-off. There are two pieces to it. One is how much discount do you give the customer, and one is how much do we accrue as a financial reserve for long-term benefits. So if we look at the left bar chart, the full bar, the black outline, is the utility rate, which is currently at 20 cents. And then as we move through time, that's projected to fall down to 12 cents or 10 to 12 cents over time. And that'll change. But with the 20-cent rate, the gray shading is the discount for customers, and the green bar is the reserve, the revenue that will be captured and accrued on behalf of the members. Mm-hmm. And then all of the other colors down low, that's just the cost of power, except blue, you'll see in the pie chart, is the operating cost. So if you move over to the pie chart, same thing, yellow, orange, blue, brownish, those are all just your power costs. Blue is the cost of the vendor team in financing and operations, and then the green piece of the pie is what we're accruing as reserves, and then you can see the customer savings there. And then what's sort of hidden behind the Zoom piece there is a similar breakdown, just the red bar being power costs, the blue being the overhead operating costs, and then our headroom in white at top, which is how much is apportioned to customer discounts versus reserves. So I know this is a lot. I don't know if there are questions. Yeah.
A couple slides back, you'd mentioned that sort of for the original wave, there was a net 19% reduction in utility costs. And then, awesome. And then so on this slide, I'm trying to get my head around the concept of headroom. And what I'm seeing here is that, so the customer rate savings, the kind of great, stripey bit, is about 5%. So can you talk me through the difference there? And then I see sort of what we're holding reserve is like 11, which feels like 16. So can you take me through sort of and help me kind of put those pieces together?
That's a really good question. I think the 5 is supposed to say 7.5. And I think the reason for that is because they conducted the assessment in late December, and then they did it again in January, and we updated it. And I think that 5% is supposed to say 7.5%. But to answer your first part of your question, yeah, net benefit 19% is perhaps
Would be
there's
the
perhaps a better way to say this, because that is, it should, what we should take away from that is the net benefit is the combined rate discount
Yeah.
plus
The reserve, the stripy bit plus the green bit.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, awesome. This is technical stuff, I know.
Oh, that's a very good question.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I gotta correct it. I think that 5% is wrong.
Okay.
Other questions?
I could do this all day. It represents potential change, and for a lot of people, that comes with some anxiety. So I know that one of the things that you'd identified, sort of several slides back, is that that we're really trying to make sure that we're considering kind of both cost savings and sort of renewable energy, in terms of kind of what we're offering to Newmarket customers. So if we were to launch into this, and those conditions were met, would there be any circumstance under which this could inadvertently cost taxpayers more?
It could not cost taxpayers more.
Okay.
The rates, there is a possible scenario where the rate for community power could exceed the rate for utility power at some point in time. We have we won't launch unless the rate is lower. Over time, we have this structural advantage in how we buy power that gives us very high confidence that on average, year after year, we will beat the utility. It is not impossible that the community power rate could at some point in time exceed the utility rate.
Okay. And then, and so in that instance, is the work then to just make sure to keep customers informed and continue to remind them that they can opt in and out at any time based on whatever they've, sussed out is the right, is the most economical for them?
Yes, I
Okay.
think that's fair. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So, I'll play devil's advocate.
Sorry.
I remember the mid-90s with the deregulation, and town of Peterborough was the poster child. I won't bring up the company that they were working with, because it's sort of the poster child, everything goes bad, from an energy company. What is there to protect the town if something blows up, if something goes completely wrong? That's
Right.
what I have to ask.
Yeah, no, so it's a good question. I think there's a couple pieces. So one thing is the structure of this community power coalition is that part of its reason for existing is it holds all the liabilities and it firewalls those liabilities from its member towns and their tax funds. So all those liabilities are non-recourse to your tax funds. Let's say something went really wrong and there were bad decisions made in procurement and costs exceeded revenues. The worst case scenario is the CPC&H would file for bankruptcy and the reserve fund would cover the liabilities. And then the other piece I'll just sort of mention here, there are a number of examples of these agencies across the country. There's let's say 2 dozen, maybe 3 dozen. And there's one example of a bankruptcy. And it's sort of, one of the lessons from that is vetting of your vendors and hiring the right energy managers is really important. So the coalition has high confidence that these folks at Ascend and Calpine are qualified to adequately manage the portfolio. And we'll get into we have an energy portfolio risk management policy, which you're all going to read in the next year. So financial reserves, this is just, again, illustrating we have these policies. They govern how the reserves are accrued and held and used on behalf of the members. There's really 2 types of reserve. There's joint reserves, which are held on behalf of all members, and you can't withdraw those. And there are targets. So in the yellow line is the 3-year target, and over 3 years, we're forecasting meeting that minimum reserve, which is 60 days of operating expense, and then over 5 years meeting the target, which is 120 days. In addition to the joint reserves for all members, any individual town in the policy is authorized to have a discretionary reserve. So let's say Eversource Power costs 20 cents. Coalition Power costs 16 cents. Newmarket could, in theory, and under the policy, put an adder on its supply rate and accrue extra revenue, extra reserve for its own reserve fund. This isn't something that's going to happen in 2023, most likely, but this is planned for and made available, so individual members could accrue their own distinct reserves that they have full authority over. So I'm going to talk about projects. Again, this is more in the 12 to 24 month time frame, but the technical assessment has indicated that there is strong alignment between developing local projects and driving costs down. So there are a number of incentives. The Inflation Reduction Act has considerable incentives for developing renewable energy projects, and particularly for municipalities developing projects, or developing them on certain income qualified or environmentally qualified sites. There is local legislation, Senate Bill 321, that can help create opportunities for community scale generators and energy storage. And this is a motivating factor for a number of the folks that are right at the front of this. Again, this is a busy slide, but for reference, this is the part of the assessment that really looks at if we're developing these projects locally, what does that do financially? And there's considerable advantage. So the reason for this is if you have a local generator and you're buying that power locally, essentially you are offsetting the need to pay for interstate transmission costs, out-of-state generators, certain wholesale costs. You just can avoid those, particularly if you, there are ways to do that. There's opportunities at present to, for example, the city of Lebanon is building a landfill gas to energy power plant in the city. There's a landfill, produces methane, they're building a turbine, and they plan to buy that power directly, and that would be sort of a revenue generator for the coalition or cost reducer for customers. So that's one example. And I don't think we need to spend too much time on this, but longer term, one of the questions is how do we, if renewable energy is a motivating factor, there's different ways to do that. One is to buy certificates, and one is to build local projects that have direct economic benefit. Okay, so pause there before we do the last bit on approval process. Okay. There's sort of three pieces. There's your electric aggregation plan, then there's the coalition's agreements and policies, and then there's launch. And the relevant materials are linked in this presentation and all available at cbcnh.org/about. So that's just for reference. And this is the one slide, and it should cover all of it. But this is great that we're having this work session. And one of the requirements under the law is that the committee hold 2 public hearings on its plan. So one of your next steps would be to schedule those public hearings and present the plan and receive public input and incorporate that. Then the plan would be brought to the council for a vote of adoption, which again has no obligation, but gives you the authority to move forward. It says amend the joint powers agreement, but Newmarket did that, so you're all good. And then you would submit the plan to the Public Utility Commission for a 60-day review. That's where we're at right now. Over the coming months and after that adoption process, there are the agreements with the coalition. So there's a cost-sharing agreement. This is a document that all members have to sign, and it is uniform across the members, and it just essentially outlines a framework to ensure that the costs are shared fairly across the collective communities using the services, and that we use this term cost causation principles. If one town is, for whatever reason, causing additional costs because their customers are more expensive to serve because they use energy at certain times, that will be accounted for. No one member will pay for another member's costs. Similarly, real quick, let's say the city of Nashua wants to develop a project and they build a solar array in Nashua and they contract to buy that power. Newmarket could choose voluntarily to sign up for that project and buy some of that electricity or not. And if you don't sign up, then none of those costs would ever be accrued to Newmarket. If you did sign up, then your ratepayers would pay for those costs. So there's just firm guidelines around ensuring costs are shared fairly. Was there a question?
Yes. So it looks like there's a number of policies that need to be kind of designed. Is that some of the work that you guys support, is helping kind of review and provide guidance around what some of those should look like?
A good question. Yes, and the policies are all designed, and they are all in existence, and it perhaps is possible that a member would identify something in one of the agreements that required amendment, but if it's the cost sharing agreement, then every single member has to amend that.
Okay.
So it is actually unlikely that these would be modified.
Okay.
So these are all in existence. They've been approved by the board. They've been approved by 10 or so towns, and those are available to the town to review and adopt.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. And so, yeah, there's the cost sharing agreement. There's the member services contract, which is attached to the cost sharing agreement, and that's the contract. That is the coalition will provide all these services to you, and you're authorizing the coalition to implement the program. And then there's the 3 policies that govern how we procure, how we set rates, and how we manage the reserves. And then there's a data security policy to make sure that we're in compliance with law and customer data is held confidential. Even after all that, Newmarket could walk away. There will be a date and time where the coalition's risk management committee will meet, and Newmarket can attend that meeting and say, and you will get a forecast, here's what the prices are in the market, are we authorized to buy your power? And you can say, nope, we're not going to do this, and then walk away and dissolve everything. Or you could say, yeah, we're ready to move forward with a program. And at that point, we'd buy your power and publish the rates, notify the utilities, notify the customers, and enroll the customers. You have to hold a public hearing 15 days after you mail notification. And this is all over perhaps a year from now. And that's the end of the materials. So happy to answer other questions. And I know a lot of this content is here's in the weeds of how the coalition is functioning, and some of that's not necessarily relevant for the typical Newmarket customer, but obviously it's very important for this council to understand and consider. But I don't know if we want to circle back to any of the committee's discussions or debates or the plan itself also.
I've got 2 things. So if you can go back 1 slide, is basically the real meat of everything is going to be step number 2, when we review all of the risk management, the cost sharing agreements and all that. One thing that kind of gave me a little heartburn or whatever, if you could talk about a situation, say Newmarket went ahead with this, and then for some reason or other, most of our customers or whatever start opting out. Where does Newmarket stand in that kind of a situation?
I mean,
There's a potential risk there for Newmarket, right?
I don't believe there is. So if
Municipality or?
there's a risk to the coalition. So one of our risks is the techies call this attrition risk, which is opt-out risk. It means your customers start to leave. So that's a risk to the coalition, and that's decreases coalition revenue. It's not a risk to the town, and it is something that in our risk management policy, it's detailed, and it's well, this is why we have to maintain lower rates, because this much rate increase equates to this much customer attrition. But there is none of those liabilities can flow to the town of Newmarket.
Okay, all right. It's not how I took it. Okay, good.
At what point in the process, let's say we adopt the agreement, we've launched it, and maybe a year later, the council has, the council at that time
Right.
Feels differently.
Right.
Maybe it's not working out the way that they thought it would, or the costs are not where they expected. At what point or how easily can the town then back out?
So there's a slide that for some reason isn't in here, but it is basically termination clause language. That's from the cost sharing agreement and really the member services contract. So I'll try to do that verbally, and then I'll send you the text of exactly how that works. The member services contract is a 36-month term, and then there are provisions for termination. In the first 12 months, you can notify to terminate, and then at the end of the 36 months, you're out. After the first 12 months, it is a rolling 36 months notice required. And that's because of the way the coalition is authorized to buy power out 36 months at first. There are also early termination provisions. So let's say you give notice for termination and you want to leave before the 36 months. You can do that so long as you're not shifting your power costs onto other communities. So CBC&H will try to sell that power, unwind it, or maybe you're only actually in a 12-month contract, and that's after you wait the 12 months contract, the town can leave. You could also leave sooner, and your portion of the reserve funds will pay for those costs that are shifted to others. If, let's say you wait the full term and you leave, your portion of the reserve pie you will withdraw and you will take it with you. It's yours. The town owns it. So these are some of the details, and I'm sorry I don't have a slide on this because I have a good graphical representation. Probably the short answer is 36-month term, and there are ways you can terminate early, and you can either buy out with your reserve or wait until that term and then take your reserve with you.
How's the reserve built again? From the ratepayers?
That's right.
Okay.
So it is.
No cash up front, no.
No. Well, there is cash from Calpine and Ascend up front.
Right.
And then those are paid back after we launch from the revenue.
So the next step is for the committee to run the 2 public hearings. We will schedule those and then come back to the town council with the updated plan, if there's any updates to it from the public hearings, which I don't imagine, but never say never.
Can staff get the documents so we can have legal counsel begin to review them?
Yeah, you do have that.
Yeah.
Although I noticed that the table of contents, the
Yeah.
pointers are all messed up.
Are these links active? I'm not sure, but these hyperlinks should work.
Okay.
And yeah, it's really 2, 3, 4
Okay.
are what you would review and adopt. And then if you just want to look at our budget, that's our favorite budget, and if you want to read our 80-page technical assessment.
You have to come up to the mic. Oh, never mind. Yeah, we're on television, so I have to be on mic.
My name is Ellen Reed, and I live at 283 Little Lane, and I have a question that was just given to me. What happens if nobody comes to the public forum?
I don't think that'll happen. I think you'll get folks, but there's no consequence necessarily. Yeah.
We have many public hearings and nobody attended, so.
I will a note that's on that point. One of the things the coalition does is sort of its comprehensive implementation service. So from plan development to materials, educational materials and handouts. So the folks that are going live, they're getting sort of marketing materials. They're getting handouts, posters, things to spread around town. They're organizing public engagement campaigns. You may have seen some local media in Seacoast recently on some of this. So there is concerted effort from the volunteers and supported by the coalition to engage and educate the public in advance. So really the goal is let everybody know before they get that piece of mail. That's hard to do, but there is a lot that can be done.
Great. I'm not seeing any other questions or comments, so Thank you so much for coming out.
Thanks.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry, appreciate it.
Yep. See the committee at your next meeting.
And thanks to the Energy and Environment Committee for doing all this
Thank you.
work.